All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Does My Vote Matter, a panel discussion sponsored by the Helen Hardin Honors College and the University Library. I'd like to thank you all for coming out today to enjoy this panel discussion on the upcoming election. So I'm going to first introduce our panelists here, starting from closest to me, then going to furthest from me. Ebony Dawkins Meeks, JD Esquire, is an associate professor teaching in the Department of Political Science at the University of Memphis, teaching classes in public law and political theory. Her teaching focuses on exploring issues of law and justice in the United States context, specifically structural influences on the expansion and retraction of democratic principles. Prior to teaching at the University of Memphis, she worked as an attorney in state and federal courts in Tennessee, focusing on issues of equity under the law in the American judiciary, including access to voting. Andre E. Johnson, Center, we have Andre E. Johnson, PhD, is a Benjamin W. Rollins Professor of Rhetoric and Media Studies in the Department of Communication and Film at the University of Memphis. He is also a Orlando Taylor Distinguished Scholar of Africana Communication, a Douglas R. Eninger Distinguished Professor of Rhetorical Studies, and the director of the newly created Center for the Study of Rhetoric, Race, and Religion. Dr. Johnson's research examines the intersection of rhetoric, race, and religion, and he teaches classes in political communication, African American public address, religious communication, interrelational communication, prophetic rhetoric, and social movements. He is the author of the award-winning No Future in This Country, The Prophetic Pessimism of Bishop Henry McNeil Turner, and his latest book with Amanda Nell Edgar is The Summer of 2020, George Floyd and the Resurgence of the Black Lives Matter Movement. Finally, Otis Sanford is the chair of the board of the Institute for Public Service Reporting and is professor emeritus in journalism at the University of Memphis. He joined the university in 2011 as the Hardin Chair of Excellence in Managerial Journalism and retired in 2023. He writes a column for the Daily Memphian online newspaper and serves as political analyst and commentator for the local ABC 24 TV station and for WKNO FM public radio in Memphis. He is the author of the critically acclaimed book From Boss Crump to King Willie, How Race Changed Memphis Politics. Professor Sanford has more than 48 years of experience in print and broadcast journalism and was inducted to the Tennessee Journalism Hall of Fame in 2014. My name is Carl Hess. I'm a librarian here at McWherter Library, and I will be your moderator. So, instead of how things are going to go, I have a few prepared questions that I'm going to ask the panelists, and then we will open things up for the audience to ask questions. So, to start, I live here in Tennessee, like I imagine a lot in the audience do, a state that is not considered a swing state in terms of the Electoral College. Does my vote matter?
All right. I think that's an excellent question, and certainly one that people in the city of Memphis in Shelby County are concerned about, because we live in a fairly liberal part of the state, in a state that is particularly conservative, and it often feels to us as though our desires politically are kind of being dampened by what's happening at the state level. But I would say that yes, your vote matters, every vote matters, not just in this general presidential election, but there are also federal elections happening for our legislative body. There are state elections that are happening. There are county elections that are happening. There are referendums for which we need to vote, and it becomes very important for each and every person who is eligible to vote, who has a vested interest in what happens in our community, to register your desires for what it is that you wish to see. And so, for that reason, yes, your vote matters, even in the state of Tennessee.
Yes. I'll say a little bit more. In all seriousness, first of all, thank you for the invitation, for allowing me to come to share along with my co-panelists here. And thank you for coming, because I know this is not the only thing going on right now, that you could be anywhere else, but you decided to stop here and to come to listen to us and to have a dialogue, and I am eternally grateful for that. So thank you. Thank you for allowing us to share space with you on today. But the answer to the question, of course, is yes. And it is yes because I think we need to start looking at and seeing the vote in a different way. And I say a different way because I think if we can see it in this way, we can really begin to generate some activity as it relates to answering the question, does my vote really matter? We need to start seeing the vote as a building block. It is not a one-time catch-all, be-all. It's not going to solve all of the problems. It's not going to be like we wake up the next day and everything that we ever wanted in our communities will change. But it is a building block. And if we look at it as a building block and as a part of a movement, and I can speak more about that later, then it becomes very, very important. It is, by all intents and purposes, the low-hanging fruit on the change tree. It's something that if you're registered, of course, you can go out and do. We have early voting, we have mail-in voting, and we have the, of course, election day voting. But as long as I'm thinking that the vote is my only thing that I need to do, then I might have a problem, because that's not it. But if I see this as a building block, that I am just putting a block on a block on a block, and then on top of that, helping to move my legislators or my elected officials in the way that I think they ought to move, then that's power. That's something that you can recruit from that. You can actually build upon that each and every election cycle. So the vote still matters. And as my co-panelist just said, local elections. We have referendum right now. We're voting November the 5th, for instance. We're voting on whether or not our elected officials have to actually live for a time in the city in which they want to lead. We're doing a residency vote, 2 years, right? So those things are important. And the vote gets us there. But it's just a building block, because we have to do it again and again to get to the place where we want to be. Thanks.
Okay, that's well said. And I echo Andre's appreciation for you all being here. Your vote absolutely matters. And it matters because it's your vote. And it's nobody else's. And I'm not going to, both Andre and Ebony stated it so well, but I'll just add this. There are a lot of political leaders already in office who are banking that young people won't vote because they know what the turnout ratio is for young people, which is the lowest of all of the demographic groups. So imagine what would happen one day, especially in a state election or a local election. Let's leave the presidential election aside. We'll talk about that in a minute. But imagine what would happen if some of these elected leaders woke up on the day after the election and they found out that 65 to 70% of young people 18 to 25 voted. Yeah. It would blow their minds. Yeah. Because some of them probably wouldn't be reelected if that were the case. So absolutely, your vote matters. As evidence, even in Tennessee, where we are a solidly red state, and we're a blue city and county in a red state. But again, if 70% of young people, and I know 70 is way out there, but if 70% of young people showed up at the polling place and voted, not just in Memphis, but in Nashville, Jackson, Clarksville, Chattanooga, and Knoxville, things would be different. So yes, it matters.
Thank you. So this question was submitted by University of Memphis students. So why should I, a member of an independent party, feel motivated to vote if our electoral system inherently discourages independent parties from winning?
Okay, I'll start with this. The primary reason is political parties are cyclical. And I'll explain what I mean by that. We haven't always just had Democrats and Republicans. Matter of fact, let me ask a question here, and this is probably just for the students. What other political party, other than Democrat or Republican, has produced a president in our history?
The Federalist Party for one.
Federalist is one.
Yeah, there's also the Democratic Republican Party.
Democratic Republican.
The Whigs.
And I mean, this guy. You're right. We haven't all, you want to add something there?
You could also include the National Union Party, which Lincoln and Johnson were during the late.
That was a National Union Party at one point. You're absolutely right. I mean,
There you go.
because we have not always just been Democrat and Republican. We've had 46 presidents. How many of those, how many of you think Republicans have won most of those elections? I don't see a hand. How many of you think Democrats won most of those elections? How many of you don't have a clue? All right, let me be very brief. Republicans have won 19. Democrats have won 17. The Democratic Republican that you mentioned won 4. The Whig won 1, and the Federalist won 1. And that was, George Washington was not affiliated at all. He didn't have a party. I'm saying all that to say that independence, if at some point in history or some point in the future, independence got the momentum, you can become a dominant party or a dominant force in politics, because again, it hasn't always been that way where we Democrats, Republicans. How do we get there? I don't know. But independents can still be a force. They have been a force in elections. Even in the last 30 to 40 years, we've had independent candidates run. They didn't win, but they made a difference in who didn't.
Right.
So it does not matter. If you want to be an independent, fine, you can still make your voices heard.
No, good point. And again, and I'm going to keep saying this because the vote and social movements tie in together. Meaning that if you are independent, one of the ways that you become more visible and more vocal is by building from the bottom up. A lot of people get excited about the top, the person on the top of it, but you need infrastructure. And if you don't have infrastructure, then you cannot do a basic get out the vote campaign, or you don't have people volunteering, making phone calls or knocking on doors and things of that nature. So if you are not tied into some sort of a group, institution, agency, something that can actually mobilize and to help get the word out about your candidacy, is going to frustrate you. But here's the good news. See what I did there? The good news in all of this is that you're right. Not only does the independent can determine, who's gonna win, but the independent can also move political platforms of the other parties. So again, building blocks though. I'm running as an independent. I don't think I'm really gonna win this time. Okay, I understand that. But if I can get a couple of things that I'm advocating onto the platform, onto the winners, whoever wins, if they will not make a nod at what I am trying to do, and we can begin to build upon that, then that's something. And you take that and you continue to build upon it. What happens is we just try to hit home runs all the time. And sometimes a bunt and a single is what you really need in order. It's not as glamorous, I understand, but that's what you need in order to do the things that you want to do long term. And so it's all about what it is that I really want to try to accomplish in this particular political season. And then how am I going to build on that in the upcoming election?
I agree with both of these gentlemen, my co-panelists, but I do want to add this about parties outside of the two major political parties that we are familiar with at this time. It is important for us to think about not only coalition building, but also that there has to be that representation of independent parties at every level of government. When Andre talks about, us wanting to hit a home run, I think one of the major frustration for people in independent parties, whether it be the Green Party or any other party, is that the candidate that they put up for president doesn't have a chance of winning because of our bipartisan, hyper-partisan system. But the reality is that in order for a candidate to win the office of president, there have to be people from the same party in school boards. There have to be people from the same party in county commissions, in city councils. There have to be people who have been elected to mayoral positions, gubernatorial positions within that same party in order to create a groundswell and in order to create enough support for the presidential run. And so for those of us in this space and who are listening, who are not wanting to be affiliated with either of the major parties and who find themselves more closely aligned with independent parties, a part of the work that you have to be doing in those independent parties is finding those spaces locally and at the state level where your party's platform is best applied. The independent party should have a platform related to local school boards. It should have a platform related to local city issues in every city USA. And that is the way that we get to the office of the president. So that's one thing that I would say. That is why, even as a person who is an independent, it is important for you to remain active in the process of voting and active in the process of politics, because it is about building a full party platform and not just only thinking of the office of the president as the pinnacle of all political life.
And if I can just add, much of what Dr. Ebony just said there happens off elections, meaning that it doesn't happen during the election like 3 weeks into the, before the election. This happens when the election is not going on and when nobody is just, watching or looking, or there are no news reporters out and stuff. You're doing the hard work then, and you have to put in that work if you want to, again, build a successful movement.
And also keep in mind that in the city of Memphis, the city election, the city mayor and the city council is nonpartisan anyway. And so they don't run by party. There was an effort last year to change that. I'm glad they did, because that forces you to not hang on to a party label, but be a lot more creative in how you want to campaign.
Right.
So it seems like every election, particularly every presidential election, is being called the most important election in our lives. So what makes this election important?
It's your turn. After you go first, man.
Oh boy, look at the time. This is so late in the evening. This is an important election, just like any and all elections are vastly important. But there are particular issues on and at this level of the election, or this time at the election, that I think we really need to begin to address. And I know when you hear people talk about democracy is on the ballot and all that, and that's a broad term and all. But I'm actually, you know what's really on the ballot for me? And I'm gonna sound old school here, but old school and what we talk about in the political communication class that I'm teaching right now. Just an understanding and a level of respect and some sort of civility, if I want to use that word, and I use it very cautiously. But we're grounding our classes in communication ethics, for instance, right? So just an ethical consideration of one another and each other. Now, within that, of course, those are some things that are going on policy-wise that can be very, let's just say, problematic for instance, a lot of people that I work with, that I support, that I serve, and a whole lot of that, and we talk about those issues. But how we talk about them, how we address them, how we frame them, how we walk with people to help them understand what those issues are, all of that is vastly important, because if we don't get that right, we come out of this election just like we went in. And then the next election would be like that. And if it's not one person, it would be another person. Because the other person is looking at that and saying, well, that worked. Well, you mean to tell me I can say that and get away with it, and I can keep on doing it, and nobody's going to say anything about it? If we can somehow hold elected officials and candidates accountable for the words and the actions that they use and how they implement their rhetoric and how they implement their political strategies, that will be a huge improvement going on forward to the next election. Because the only way democracy stands is that there is a baseline of understanding that all of us can operate out on, and if there's not, then this thing is going to crumble, it's going to shake, it's going to keep on shaking.
All right, so I've been thinking about this particular topic quite a lot lately because I am particularly impacted by this kind of language. It's the most important election of our lifetime. It's the most important election of our lifetime. And what I have come to is that every election is in fact the most important election of our lifetime, because we are alive right now. We are not alive 200 years ago, and we will not be alive 100 years from now. And what happens during our lifetime is what matters. And because we have a representative democracy, we have the ability to choose how our government is organized, who is in charge, or who we have charged with maintaining our democratic republic. And so it does matter, and it is the most important election of our lifetime. I've been thinking about cooking a lot. And when I think about that, I think about, like a crock pot, right? You want to have something for dinner tonight, and so you throw a few things in the crock pot and you set it and you forget it. You go about your day and you come back and boom, dinner's ready. Democracy is not a crock pot. Okay? You don't set it and forget it. It requires our constant active participation and vigilance. And so this election is important because we are alive right now, and whom we choose and charged with maintaining our democracy will matter to us right now. It will impact the ways in which we experience and live our lives right now. And as Dr. Andre said earlier, it is the first step in many steps of maintaining the democracy that we have come to know and understand. So after we vote, then we have to be involved in the process of oversight, understanding, asking questions, being involved in various and sundry ways. So yes, this is the most important election of our lifetime, and guess what? The next election will be the most important election of your lifetime too.
I'm going to be very pointed with my response to that. This election is the most important of our lifetime because of two words: Donald Trump.
What?
It just
Donald
is.
Trump.
I mean, voters have to decide here, and I came here to not be partisan, but this is the reality. Voters in this election have to decide: do they want Donald Trump back into the White House or go a different way? And the decision is the most important, in my view, of our lifetime. Because if we say yes, we know what we're going to get. If we say no, we're going into uncharted waters too. But this is a crucial election that you mentioned democracy. That's just not some platitude. This is a crucial election when it comes to whether our nation is still upholding the democratic ideals that the founders intended. And so, yes, this is absolutely, I've been around and I've voted in every presidential election since 1972. But I have been watching every election since 1960. And there have been some crucial ones. This is the most crucial one because of Donald Trump.
And if I can piggyback off of that just for a moment, you know, the issue I think that we find in the candidate Donald Trump is one that we have to take seriously in terms of how we understand the state of the nation that we exist in. However it is that you understand democracy and what it means to be free, that is an experience that this particular candidate is pointedly saying that he intends to change. Whether it be language like, I promise this is the last election you'll ever have to vote in. Or if it is language about talking about using the military to deal with the enemy from within, whomever that might be, I don't know. But that is a serious indication of democratic erosion and democratic decline. So whatever it is that you understand about what it means to be free as a U.S. citizen, you have to understand that there is a candidate right now who is alerting you, signaling to you that it is his intention to change your experience of democracy and freedom. And so for that reason, it is important for us to take very seriously the charge that we have as citizens to vote and to pay attention to who the candidates are and what they are saying and how those things can change our material existence. You know, I really don't know that American people who are alive today can really fathom what it would mean to live in this nation without democracy, because we haven't had to experience it. And we are a nation of over 330 million people. We do not have the capacity to understand what it would be like to lose our freedom. And so for that reason, it is important for us to guard our freedom with everything it is that we have.
So it seems as though there's more pronounced presence of misinformation and disinformation in the U.S. in the last decade or so. Is there any perspective you can provide to give us more context on how to understand and engage in this moment? And in what ways can people in the body of politics increase their media literacy in a world subject to AI-generated images and video?
I defer to the communications.
Yeah, I'm the media guy. Well, the fact is, disinformation and misinformation has been around for as long as the country has been around. We didn't just start disseminating disinformation and outright lies in a broad way with the advent of the internet and social media. George Washington was a victim of disinformation. The British created fake letters and pretended that the letters were from Washington and sent them to people saying the Revolutionary War was a mistake. And that was a disinformation campaign. And a lot of people thought George Washington was behind it. And that's one of the reasons why he only served 2 terms. Because he said, I don't want to take this anymore. And so disinformation has always been around. It is incumbent upon us as consumers to know where you're getting your information from. Check your sources. Rely on credible sources. It's okay to read a whole variety or consume a whole variety of things, especially on social media. But, there was an old saying, believe half of what you see and none of what you hear. And make sure you know where those sources are and make sure that they're reputable sources, credible sources, and not believe everything that you see and hear, especially on social media. But it's been around forever, and I don't think it's ever going to go away. It's just up to us to be discriminatory in what we believe and what we just toss to the side as just entertainment or babble.
I'm still got thoughts here.
Well, I have to tell you that this is something that that I think about quite a bit. The AI images that I have seen just across social media, and some of them appear to be very real. Even if you're watching YouTube, sometimes those commercials that come out with someone talking about, I don't know, various and sundry things, and if you're not paying close attention, you don't realize that it is an auto-generated image. It's an AI image. And whomever it is that's depicted in the video is not actually saying the words that you hear coming across your screen. I wish that I knew the answer to this question. I think we are in new territory. I think that AI is extremely sophisticated. And at the very least, I think what we can do is be vigilant to the fact that AI is out there and it can be utilized in order to spread disinformation in a way that I think for many of us, I don't care how sophisticated you are, I think it could be difficult for us to ascertain whether or not the things that we are seeing are in fact true. And that's really the only place that I've gotten to yet. I'm not wise enough to know how to answer that and how to fix it yet.
I don't think we are, none of us are, but this is a great time for me to plug the Communication Studies Department. Since we do, I see one of our graduate students, AD is here. We talk about, images and trying to be critical, aware of what's going on and all that wonderful stuff. So, come study with us. Okay, yeah. So, got to made my chair proud. It is, and I'm gonna try to truncate this because I really do have a lot to say about this. Because there are 2 major parts of disinformation. That's what I want to talk about, disinformation. The intended use of misinforming the public. It is the sinister that I plan to do this. Misinformation, you done shared or liked the post, or you shared it and you find out that it was kind of false. You can kind of, oh, my bad, I'm gonna take this down. Disinformation wants you to believe it. So you get disinformation, and one of the first parts is just to flood their way with a whole lot of disinformation, right? But the other part of it, and the more, in my estimation, this more sinister part, which hurts democracy, is that part of the disinformation campaign is that you can't trust them sources either. Right. The credible sources, can't trust it. Daily Memphian and Commercial Appeal, you know what the, and so even when you try to say, hey, this is the truth, or here's some more credible, the disinformation campaign has already criticized that source. So what do when you don't have credible source? Where you go to the other sources that is producing the disinformation. And so disinformation campaigns look different. Some of them are intended to cause groups, smaller groups, to war against each other. We're seeing it in the African American community right now, with this whole black men for Trump, women for Kamala Harris, and all this. A bunch of just disinformation to get people to do this. Forget it. It don't make it. It don't matter. It don't matter. I'm just tired of doing this. I'm just going to go live my life. But here's the problem. If you don't do politics, politics gonna do you. You ain't gonna be able to do your life, because you are going to be governed by people who have an agenda that really sometimes may not include you. So you can't even give up. You can't even quit. You just can't sit back. This is why the movement, again, I keep saying movement, maybe because I'm a social movement scholar, I don't know. But a movement that, think about it in this way, speaking about African Americans. That long ago, I know people that could not vote. They literally could not vote, could not cast a vote. In theory, maybe, but in practice, no. Well, what do? You build. You talk to people who could and try to convince them that, hey, if you go out and vote for this candidate said that they will actually open up some avenues for me so I can vote. And again, building each and every election. And that's exactly what we're going to do with all of this AI, with all of the imaging, with all of, and the other thing is that the disinformation is quicker. We get it instantaneously. We talked about it today in class. We get it just like, not even overnight, just like, oh, that was, refresh my feed, here comes some more disinformation, right? So one of the things I am actually looking and suggesting to solve some of this is that I don't think candidates should be able to flat foot out lie to the American people. I know free speech and all that, I get it, but you should not be able, for instance, in a disasters area, be able to lie about FEMA, the groups of people that can come and help you. That should be against the law. You should not be able to misinform in that way. And so, but politicians and elected officials, candidates have the shield where they can just get up and just say anything, and they govern themselves. Like, you can get a sentence, you can be censored, or you can be, even expelled, but that's rarely ever happened. You should not be able to do that. You should not be able to cite misinformation in the congressional record. You should not be able to do that on the school board, though. Because the public needs to trust its leaders. Somebody has to be an arbiter for this, so I can now govern myself accordingly, whether I agree with you or disagree, at least I feel like you're telling me what I need to know. And when I get that, then that's okay, because now I have the information. I have given you consent. We talk about consent in the class. The consent to govern. You have the consent. You have my vote. Even if I did not vote for you, you're not my representative, and you're supposed to represent me too. And all of us are supposed to be in this thing together. All we need is a baseline of truth, though. You cannot misinform us. That should be illegal.
And very briefly, I want to plug a wonderful book by my former colleague over in the Department of Journalism and Strategic Media, Dr. Joe Hayden, who wrote a book recently about disinformation and the history of disinformation and the dangers of different disinformation. And I encourage you to look at that.
For our final prepared question, so you're registered to vote. Now what? How do you get information about candidates and elections? How do you evaluate that information?
So once you're registered to vote, it is important for each one of us, when we get to the ballot box, that we are there as informed voters. So if you're living in Shelby County, you can go to the Election Council's website. You can do this in every state, USA, and you can see a sample ballot that will give you information about who is running for what. It will give you information about what referenda will be on the ballot. And because we live in the information age, and because we all have access to computers in our pockets every day, you can even take out your cell phone and say, "Hey Siri, who is so-and-so, so-and-so? Hey Siri, what is a Tennessee State Supreme Court Justice?" And find out information about what you are being asked to vote for. Some of this will require you to be intellectually curious enough to find the information and to look for the information. But there are some places where you can go to the Shelby County Election website. There is a website that is dedicated to keeping up with every elected official, or every candidate for an elected position across the state. So you can look up people's names, you can get basic information about them. You can also go, for example, to the Tennessee, to the state.tn.gov and to the Secretary of State's office and look for information with regard to what is coming up in the upcoming election. So there's information out there for you that comes from official websites that you can trust to review for yourself. And then, if you see something that you don't know what it means, you can look it up. There's nothing wrong with that.
And let me just add, that was great right there. And but before you do all of that, you might want to just check with the Shelby County Election Commission and see if you're still registered to vote. Because sometimes, maybe a glitch, maybe intentional, not intentional, whatever, you may show up at your polling place and all of a sudden your name is no longer on the ballot, or your polling place, because you always voted at such and such place all these years, and then all of a sudden this year, the polling place moved. And you're not thinking about it. You're just, I'm going to go down there and vote like I normally do. So you have to do all of those things at first. And that's the sad part about it. All that stuff that we just talked about, that's the sad part. Because you should not have to map out a strategy to go vote. You should not have to wonder, I wonder if I can get to work on time if I go vote this morning, or I have to wait till the evening time. You should be able to go into a polling place and all the machines work. And you got multiple machines, not two, not one, but multiple machines. You should be able to do all of that. You should be able, this is something I've been, in my own community work, and I've been working on and trying to get people to understand, why is it so difficult to vote, to cast a vote sometimes? It should not be just, we celebrate long lines. Okay, but why? We need more voting. Okay, that means we might need more machines, more voting locations. What would it look like to bring some voting machines in the UC here, in the ballroom, and vote? What would it look like to take some machines out in different places and spaces in the community? I mean, this is what democracy looks like when people are empowered to go out and to make their voices heard through the vote. And if you allow me just to say this one little thing, since I am a person of faith, I think the vote is sacred. It is a sacred thing that we undertake because of the past, the many people who have, and I'm looking at a lot of folk in this room, there was a lot of people that went before you that gave you and helped you get the right that we have today. But also, it is something about agency, which we talk about a lot in the class as well too. What can I do as a citizen of this wonderful country to help make better, not only for myself and my family, but for others as well too? That's what the vote really, really means, at least to me, and it is something that I treasure, and I hope and pray that we have it for years on the end to come.
I'll be very brief with just touching on getting the information about candidates. And I'll just say this. I am really sorry, and dismayed is a better word, that newspapers have deteriorated, because historically it was the credible community local newspaper that put plenty of effort and attention into evaluating local, state, and even national candidates, interviewing them, backgrounding them, finding out what they have done right or wrong, and whether they were even registered to vote, and telling the public who was the best qualified candidate for every position on the ballot. We did that for years. And it may have made the losing person mad, but it was a public service for the newspaper. I'm talking about should be a trusted medium in town to help you to determine who was the best candidate for District 3 on the city council or District 5 on the school board. That has gone away. And so now it is you have to do more work, to your point. It's out there. There's some information out there, but there is not that newspaper anymore that is processing that information, reporting that information to help you to understand who the best candidate is. And that's a shame, because now you got to go and do a lot more work yourself.
And if a candidate did not come to one of the newspaper's forums what would happen when you reported that?
Well, we tell people that they refuse. That happened to me several times. We had a mayoral candidate refuse to come in.
Right.
We just tell the public that, and you use that to evaluate their credibility.
Exactly.
If they wanted to be a part of answering the questions and helping the public understand who they were, they would have come in. But the fact that they didn't, you can go ahead and vote for them. But you make your decisions based on their credibility.
Thank you for all that information. And while we're talking about this, I'm going to put a plug. At the table at the back today, our Government Publications Department has organized a lot of that information there for you to come take a look at.
Right.
But that ends our prepared questions. So now I'm going to turn it over to the audience. So if you have a question, please raise your hand. I'll call on you. And after you ask your question, I will repeat the question for our virtual attendees. And the panelists will answer. So your hand first.
I have two questions. Why is Tennessee not putting the abortion issue on our ballot like it is in 10 other states this time?
So why is Tennessee not putting the abortion issue onto the ballot in the way that other states have?
We don't have ballot initiatives in the state of Tennessee. You can't go.
Right. Go ahead.
We as the people, you cannot initiate a ballot initiative in the state of Tennessee. That's part of our constitution.
The legislature is the only one that's, to your point,
Yeah.
the legislature is the only one that's empowered to do that. And that's why, our legislature has more power than it should have. And you're absolutely right. We can't do that like a Ohio or Kansas or even a Florida this year. And it's because the legislature, there's no permission.
And your second
Okay.
question?
The second one was the electoral college. I mean, there's been more than one election when a person won the ballot, actually, and still lost.
Oh, yeah.
How can we get rid of the electoral college and just have votes count?
So
Yeah.
the question is, with the electoral college multiple times recently, having the person who won the popular vote not win the electoral college, how can we get rid of the electoral college?
The electoral college is ensconced in the US Constitution. And in order to get rid of the electoral college, that means that there would have to be a constitutional amendment in order to remove the electoral college from our US Constitution. And at this time, I don't think that there is the appetite to remove the electoral college or the support in our legislative body to make that amendment. And I don't know that there's really support among the states. There is among the people.
Right.
And so, I think that one of the important things that people can do is to begin to agitate for that and to organize around this principle.
No, but we're obviously.
Yes, I mean, really, we're talking about, this is a part, I think, of movement work. An important part of movement work within a democracy is for people to organize across identities, across socioeconomic status, across political lines, because people from various and sundry life experiences are feeling the same way that you are. Why do we have the electoral college? We don't even need it anymore. We don't want it. And so the other thing about movement work is that we have to realize that it takes a long time. And it takes a lot of organizing, and it takes stamina, and it takes being able to tap out and tap back in when you're ready to come back in. And so once you begin to build that coalition, know that it might not happen this year. It might not happen in the next 10 years. But if we keep pushing for it, it will happen eventually.
See a question right there?
So going back to the conversation on, this being the quote unquote most important election of our time, right? I feel as if when this time comes around in our democracy, we often hyper focus on the presidential campaign. But my question, and I kind of want to know your perspective on this, is how important is also looking at the campaigns on the citywide, local, state level, because the states are going to be able to essentially have more power to change things a lot quicker than going from the top down. So I kind of want to know y'all's perspective on that.
That's connected actually to Dixie's question about the amendment, the changing the amendment and the first part of what you said about trying to get, things on the ballot. Come on, let's journey just a little bit. What if we looked at a state race, for instance, and we know that, a lot of people would say, well, the reason why we this type of way is because of gerrymandering or whatever. But a statewide race, whether United States Senate or governor, It's really one person, one vote. It doesn't matter the district. Whoever gets the most, 50 plus 1. What does it say when there are folk who have done the work of movement? So much so that the polls now say that there is a plurality for reproductive choice, for some gun legislation, Medicare, expansion of Medicare. What does it say then if the folk have done that work and then candidates who run on that platform, because they can count, they say, well, 60, 75% want Medicare, so I'm gonna run on that. That makes sense. But the candidates that don't support that still get elected. Sooner or later, we are gonna have to look in the mirror and say, you know what? That might be on me. That might be on us. Hashtag blame the voters. Because sometimes when people have done the work and then you get a candidate who has listened and said, okay, I agree with you. I'm going to run on that. Here's my platform. And they still lose? How is that? Were the polls wrong? Did people, lie to the pollsters? I don't know, but it happens all the time. And sooner or later, the same people who have been voting one way, and if they want the change that they are desiring, will have to start voting another way. And so that's why the state races are so important. The Senate race, and then in 2 years, the governor's race. So you may not you got the supermajority, but what if you change the governor? Then all of a sudden now, you might have some sort of backstop or some sort of, hey, we're not gonna, that's a little bit too out there. Or the movement has happened, and now even the people that are in the legislative offices might have to change their opinions, because now they see that statewide that this thing is different than it used to be. But you got to vote. You got to support the candidates that at least say they support you. That verbally say, I support you. That's what I'm going to do. Versus the one who will look you in your face and say, nah, that's not important. I'm doing something else.
I would just say the second most important race in this election is the U.S. Senate race. Now, the polls would say that the Republican is a prohibitive favorite and it'll be a landslide. Doesn't have to be. Again, if young people who have a different mindset, if they showed up at 65 to 70% clip, that would be a different outcome. And the reason it's important is because the majority in the U.S. Senate is crucial to pretty much everything that happens. Supreme Court appointments, a whole host of things. So that's why I say the second most important on the ballot is the Senate race.
And from my perspective, I think that all of the elections at every level of government are equally important. And I'm not sure if it's a matter of educating voters and people, our neighbors, people who live around us in our communities, about the equal importance of every level of government. We have a system of federalism in the United States in which what happens at the state level impacts you, and what happens at the federal level impacts you, and what happens at the local level impacts you. And so it then becomes important for us as citizen voters to be aware of not only who is running, but how each one of these levels of government is impacting our day-to-day living experience. And I think that the more that we can do education with people about that, the more that people will be able to find the importance and also paying attention to local elections, statewide elections.
That is exactly what we do. Again, in the community, in my church and other places, do that work right there. Not necessarily talk about the individual candidates that's running, but why the position is important and why you might want to have that position filled with by somebody who is more aligned to your interests versus something else. So yeah, you're absolutely right.
So we have time for one more question. I see back there. Yes.
Thanks. So I think there's an elephant in the room that we're not mentioning, which is the role of money in politics. The Democrats and Republicans take money from super PACs, they take money from corporate America, they take money from AIPAC. So they're bought and paid for, right? And so what I'm seeing in this election is the Green Party is actually poised to make a breakthrough, right? They are beating Kamala Harris among Muslims in Michigan, in Wisconsin, in Arizona. And if they get 5%, that will unlock something like $10 million in federal funding. So one of the reasons why the Green Party doesn't have local, state officials is because it's too expensive. It's a people-powered party that does not, and deliberately does not, take corporate and other kinds of dark money. So if that $10 million gets unlocked by breaking the 5% threshold, it could set up funding for a whole lot of local campaigns, right? I mean, it costs something like $2 or $3 million to get a House seat. It costs around $8 or $9 million to get a Senate seat, right? So the whole government, Democrat, Republican, they're already bought and paid for. I think this election is a chance for us to break the 5% barrier. And given that we're in a red state of Tennessee, is not a vote for the Democrats a wasted vote when we could actually vote green and contribute to the 5% and thereby contribute to building a movement that's actually in potential breaking the duopoly of the two-party system that we have.
Thank you for that question. I think that to start, the issue of financial contributions from mega donors, from billionaires, from corporations who our United States Supreme Court says should be treated as individual people, is certainly the elephant in the room, and it is an undercurrent of the problem in American politics at every single level. It also is one of the things that I think frustrates individual citizen voters, whether we know it or not, or whether people are hyper aware of it or not. This is a part of what leads to the frustration when you as a constituent call your senator or call your representative at any level, and you have difficulty with getting anyone to call you back or even take down notes about what your call is regarding. So that is important. And I think it is an issue that any independent party, whether it be the Green Party or any other independent party, should be bringing to bear for citizens to understand. And I think this goes back to a question that a student asked earlier about, well, I am an independent, so should I be voting? Why should I be voting? Does it even matter in the state of Tennessee? To Dr. Pova's point, absolutely it matters. You can see that there is a strategic way to begin to think about how we organize ourselves through voting, around voting, and around other democratic principles that are related to voting. So I agree with you 100%.
And the issue, we can thank the Supreme Court and the Citizens United decision that allowed all of that kind of money, to your point, to go into campaigns. Elon Musk, I didn't think I was going to use his name, but I got to use it here because this is a local story too.
Yes.
Yes.
Elon Musk, the guy who has put what is supposed to be the AI, going back to your question about the AI supercomputer right here in Memphis, has contributed $200 or so million to the Trump campaign, while at the same time being a part of the disinformation that we've been talking about. So the allowance of millions of dollars by one individual into political campaigns, thanks to Citizens United, I think was one of the worst Supreme Court decisions of our time. And we're sowing, we're reaping the benefits or the detriment of that right now.
Well, we're at the end of our discussion today, so we're all gonna have a round of applause for our panelists today. And also get a round of applause for all the staff at the Helen Hardin Honors College and the University Library. Praveen?
I want to say one thing, please. The screen has been rotating between this slide and the other one, and Carl has put together a really good guide. The next one. Carl has put together a really good guide on where to get information, and a lot of articles talking about the different candidates from the commercial appeal. That one. And if you just, take a picture of the QR code, you'll get directly to it. And I've got 2 printouts of that with the QR code on there as well. And there are lots of pamphlets back here with QR codes on them, which students, you all are very well versed with that. Just take a picture. You can check to see if you're registered to vote, and you can, download the Go Vote TN app and all kinds of other goodies. So if you want to, please just stop by that table before you leave. Thank you.
And for all the faculty, that includes you.
Oh, no, when you.
When I was on the faculty here, I gave every student who voted extra credit.
Oh.
Extra credit if you voted and came back and showed me either with the I know I voted sticker that they have, which I think is in the shape of Tennessee.
Yeah.
The shape of Tennessee, the state. Give your students extra credit for going to vote. Now, that might be illegal. I don't know. Fine votes, but.
Are we still recording?
I'm just encouraging. Please vote. Please vote. It's important.
And on that message of offering credit for votes.